Hi everyone, my name is Nick, and today we're going to spotlight some houseplants that have different colors on the undersides of their leaves. This has been one of my favorite characteristics that a houseplant can have since day one of my indoor gardening career, and I'm surprised I've never made a video focusing on just this subject before, so that's changing today. I'm going to be highlighting 8 different plants today that all belong to their own genera or genus of plants, so there's a lot of variety to share. And the first one I think I'm going to talk about is probably the best example of one of these houseplants, I would say, because not only is this houseplant very common, but I feel like this is probably the first example of one of these houseplants that you've ever come across, perhaps at even your first time going to a houseplant store or a botanical garden or anything of that nature. So that one is none other than the ever so lovely Stromanthe sanguinea or thalia Triostar. And this is the variegated version of the Stromanthe sanguinea or thalia, so it sports this white variegation that really makes the pink pop, which I think is why this plant has really been one of those most popular ones. And also, it really is just such a showstopper with the way that the leaves kind of unfurl, as you can see with this new one coming in right here, as well as this one right here. Really shows off the color that's hiding beneath the leaves. Even if you're looking at the front, you're still going to have some of those pink notes pop through on the new growth. So it's really such a beautiful houseplant. In fact, this is, I feel like, a bit of a catfish when it comes to houseplants, let's say. This is so beautiful, and it's, amongst all of those other houseplants that are usually very easy and common at your local houseplant stores or even big box stores. These, however, are a little bit more finicky. I would not call a Stromanthe a beginner houseplant at all. And I should mention that Stromanthes are a member of a group of plants referred to as prayer plants. So other examples of prayer plants are Marantas, which are typically commonly known as prayer plants, as well as calatheas, or calatheas, whatever you want to call it. And all of these houseplants are going to be other ones that sport different colors on the backsides of their leaves. I just personally think that Stromanthe is like the most dynamic of all of these houseplants because it really does have such show-stopping foliage on the front and really such bright tones on the back, where a lot of Marantas and calatheas are more darker reds and purples, which you're going to see a lot of today, mind you, but this is just so bright and vibrant. I really think it stands out amongst the rest. Not to mention, it is one of the only prayer plants that I grow in my home at this point because I have struggled with them throughout the years. But this one has stuck around for me for some reason. I don't really have many tips when it comes to growing these houseplants because I still find them to be very difficult, but really just letting them acclimate to your space, I think, is the most important thing. These are coming from greenhouses where they're grown in the perfect lighting and the perfect humidity, receiving the perfect amount of water, and we bring them home and they're receiving the exact opposite of that, so they will take time to acclimate. Everything on this plant here is new growth, so the plant that was in this pot originally when I was given this from a friend died back, and then all of this foliage has grown out since. So it does take time to get to a beautiful prayer plant, but it is very possible. It just takes a lot of patience or perhaps persistence, whatever works for you. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about prayer plants first, because I really do think they are the best example of these houseplants, because they're definitely the ones you're going to see, whether it's a Stromanthe sanguinea or a calathea, a maranta, a tenanthe. There are so many varieties of prayer plants out there, and they're all so freaking gorgeous, but they are also such a headache. So just keep in mind how much money you would like to spend on your prayer plants. I kind of often think about many prayer plants when I'm bringing them in my home as the bouquet of flowers of the houseplant world, where it's going to look gorgeous for a set amount of time, a couple months usually, and then it's not going to look so hot in most cases, and often I might find myself getting rid of it and then bringing in a new one to replace it, just like you do with a bouquet of flowers. So that's my little analogy, simile, metaphor. I don't know, guys. So the next one I want to talk about, actually this is a very fitting one to talk about next. So this is a Aglaonema chocolate. I've been talking about this one a lot lately, I do apologize. But this is one of the only varieties of Aglaonema that comes to my mind that sports different colors on the backside of their leaves. Now this already has some pretty dark foliage on the front, but when I flip it over to the back, it's got that more like plum purple color, and I think it really helps those pink stripes that the leaves have stand out. But I did want to talk about this one specifically because I think this is a doppelganger to another type of prayer plant that exists, the Calathea ornata, if you are familiar, which I do not grow in my home because that is the biggest headache of all of the Calatheas that I'm aware of. But this one looks pretty darn similar with those pink stripes that the leaves have, with the dark foliage on the front as well as the purple that hides on the backside of the leaves. The only added thing I think this houseplant has, not only the fact that it's ridiculously easy to care for in comparison, but the leaves do have a little bit more variegation to them, a little bit more patterns that you would see more common with other Aglaonemas that are on the market, with the added bonus that it has these pink stripes. So there's a lot to love about this houseplant. I'm not going to go on too long about it, but definitely one of the Aglaonemas that can be a little bit more elusive and perhaps not necessarily expensive, because, well, all Aglaonemas are pricey because of how they are sold wholesale and grown very slowly, so just keep that in mind. But if you do come across a good plant of this and it's one you're looking for, I wouldn't be too regretful with making that purchase, because it's an Aglaonema, and unlike a Calathea, for example, where you're not guaranteed that you're going to have that on the long term, an Aglaonema is absolutely a house plant that you will have for a long time, as long as you don't overwater it, or, there are ways to kill your Aglaonemas. I've killed plenty of Aglaonemas, but they are very, very tough plants to kill and very reliable ones to grow in your home. So if you are looking for a little bit of added color, I would say this is probably one of the easiest houseplants that falls into this category that I'm talking about today. Because often you find houseplants that are very beautiful, like the Stromanthe, and it turns out they're not so easy to care for, but Aglaonemas across the board are ridiculously easy. I think I'm going to talk about this one next, as I believe it's been gaining quite a bit of popularity as of late. So this is my Syngonium erythrophyllum Llano Carti Rd. It's a bit of a mouthful. This is a more out there variety, I would say, of what's commonly referred to as arrowhead vine, the most common species of which would be Syngonium podophyllum, and there's just so many varieties of podophyllum on the market. The pink ones, the variegated version, are some of the more popular ones that you might see on social media. However, I've never had that much luck with growing those myself, but I can report that I've had much better success with growing the Syngonium erythrophyllum Llano Carti Rd. I don't know if it has to do with the leaves being darker or more thick, but they just seem to be much more reliable, much lower maintenance than the other ones, which those are supposed to be easy houseplants. Everyone says that, but I feel like everyone has that one easy houseplant that they just cannot successfully grow. So Syngonium podophyllum is that for me. So I'm happy to report that this one is much easier to grow, and I think it's much more interesting in my own opinion, because it's got that really beautiful maroon color hiding on the back sides of the leaves that really contrasts with this like dark olive, like really almost nearly black in some of the leaves. At some point they kind of fade back to a more like dark olive color, but a lot to love with this houseplant. The only downside to this houseplant, I would say, is that it's a little bit more elusive. It's not commercially grown, I believe, so it can be a little bit more hard to get your hands on and therefore cost a little bit more money. However, I think that's a good time to mention that this one I got in particular is from stevesleaves.com, and from now until the end of March 2022, you can use code NICK15 to save 15% on any purchase you make from stevesleaves.com. So you can save yourself a lot of money on a Syngonium erythrophyllum Llano Carti Rd or any of the other wonderful houseplants that they have in stock, which is a lot. So this one has been, like I said, much more reliable. It's not one to wilt as quickly as some of the other more thinner leaf Syngonias. I find they will just like get so flaccid and limp like so quickly upon underwatering, and that's when they start to get like brown edges and maybe some yellow leaves. So this plant has really been tough as nails in my experience. This is actually a newer one that I have in my home. I've probably only had this one for about a year's time. I have another one that I've had for about 3 years now, and it's actually much smaller than this because it grew very, very long, and the vines had probably were just long, like 3 feet vines that just had like 7 leaves on the end of them. So I ended up cutting them back basically to inside the pot and propagating the stems, and then allowing the stems that were still in the pot to regrow. And now I have a nice other little Syngonium Llano Carti Rd sitting on my desk, which isn't quite as full as this, as it's still in the early stages of regrowing, as I just cut it back not too long ago. But very reliable houseplant to grow, very easy to propagate. So I'm just very thrilled. Share me your tips for growing Syngonium podophyllums, because I would love to be able to grow them. They are such a vibe. They totally fit like my woodlandy aesthetic, but I'm struggling at the moment. So next up, you're probably noticing the gap in my shelf back here. Maybe, maybe not. And maybe you're noticing it's the penis pot that's missing. So yes, of course, I'm going to be talking about Peperomia pereskiifolia today. So this is a rather plain Peperomia in the grand scheme of things. I feel like this is a Peperomia that is never really going to get the traction, unfortunately, that some of its other cousins get, like the watermelon Peperomia, and more lately like the Peperomia quadrangularis and the turboensis. But this Peperomia has just got some plain green leaves. It's almost like the dulled down version of like Tetragona or Dulstedii or any of these, similar leaf-shaped Peperomias. However, I do really love that this plant does get some really pronounced red on the back sides of the leaves. Now I will say, I have another Peperomia pereskiifolia in my home that I got from a different purveyor. This one is from Steve's Leaves, actually, code Nick 15. So this one is from Steve's Leaves, and it gets the red on the backside of the leaves. I got another one from a more local greenhouse, and that one doesn't get the red on the backside of the leaves. So I don't know if it's a variety thing. I don't know if it's a sun stress thing, which this one isn't really receiving any stress. It's just growing underneath the grow lights that I have here on my shelf, but it still is pretty consistently putting off these beautiful red undersides with these still very deep green oversides. I don't know. So the top sides of the leaves are called the adaxial surface, and the bottom sides of the leaves are abaxial, which probably is a little difficult to remember, but if you just remember that, well, I was gonna say above, below, oh my gosh, I don't really think there's a better way to do this. I remember it because below abaxial, but then you could think above. So that's not really a helpful tip whatsoever. Anyway, just remember it. Do your own research, find your own way to remember it, because I'm clearly no help. Anyway, the abaxial of these leaves are red and the adaxial surface is green. So I think I should move on to a new plant soon, because now I'm starting to feel kind of like an idiot. But anyway, it's a Peperomia. It prefers to be in bright and direct light. It does not like to be overwatered by any means. This is a very drought tolerant plant, which is why I have it inside this terracotta planter, which this is by a company called Group Partner, if you are curious. But this is just proving over the last 3 years or so to be a very easy growing, robust Peperomia that fills out on its own. You can see it's really only 2 plants inside the pot here, and they're just branching out from the base and continuing to grow new stems, and really just has a lot of character. But like I said, unfortunately this houseplant just doesn't seem to get the attention that it deserves, which I totally understand, because there are like 1,000 Peperomias in existence, and a lot of them have more showy foliage than this. And there are other varieties of Peperomia too that do have the reds on the undersides of the leaves, like the Peperomia rubella, Peperomia verticillata red log. Those are the 2 coming to my mind, but there are plenty more out there. This is just the one I wanted to talk about today because, like I said, just don't think it gets the attention that it deserves. Alrighty, so speaking of houseplants that don't get enough attention, this is one of my favorites. So this is Cissus adenopoda. So I have been a huge advocate for Cissus over the last couple years, because I just think they're everything you need and more. Look at this plant. Like, this just hangs out on my bookcase. It just spills forward. It's everything I need, and it sports, I guess it's not as robust as I always think it is, but it sports this like purple, oh gosh, I hope I'm not cheating with this one. It sports this purple backside of the leaves that I guess, depending on its sun stressing or how new the leaves are, as these ones are plain green on the back, gets a nice purple to it. So it does have a lot of character. Now I just feel like I maybe prematurely picked this one to talk about for this video, but I think you guys can get the gist from this. But Cissus, like I was saying, they just deserve way more attention. I really appreciate this just woodlandy vibe that they have. It literally looks like kind of like poison ivy, poison oakish kind of deal, something that you shouldn't be touching out in nature, but you can. In fact, I think it's non-toxic, so I think that's another plus for Cissus. I hope I'm not making that up. I don't think I'm making that up. So the one thing I will say about these though is that they like to grab onto things. You can see like this right here is getting ready to grab onto anything. You can see all these curlies right here are curls that wrapped around other plants in the vicinity, and I just yanked them off because every time I pull this off the shelf to go water it, it has grabbed onto something else, which sounds like it could be like a downside of this plant, but honestly, it's something I love about it. It's just really filling out its space. It's getting to know everyone in its vicinity. I really appreciate that. It's got a lot less social anxiety than I have. So power to you, Cissus adenopoda, but it's a very inexpensive houseplant. Cissus across the board, I can't imagine you paying more than $20 for a Cissus. I know that Cissus amazonica was like gaining popularity for some reason, but I don't think that's an expensive houseplant anymore, and it shouldn't be. I'm opinionated on Cissus, I guess, but Cissus adenopoda, if you have gotten maybe a little bit more acclimated with the more common Cissus, like Cissus rhombifolia, and you're looking for one that's a little bit more out there and fuzzy and fun and has purple on the backside of the leaves, I think Cissus adenopoda is perfect for you. And this is not a sponsored video by any means, not a paid promotion, but I did get this one from Steve's Leaves as well, so code Nick15, use it. So next up, I'm going to talk about one that's not from Steve's Leaves. So this is my Begonia erythrophylla, although Steve's Leaves does have a lot of begonias available. Oh my god, I promise this isn't a sponsored video. I literally legally have to click a button if this is a sponsored video. But use my code. So this is Begonia erythrophylla and, or erythrophyllum? I think it's erythrophylla. I'll figure it out. But this, very similar to the Syngonium erythrophyllum and every other houseplant that I'm talking about in today's video, sports a really wonderful color on the backside. This is probably the most like crimson red of all of the ones I'm going to be talking about today. I would say when you're typically going to see colors on the backsides of plants, they are most often going to be purple. And then red as well. I feel like purple, yeah. No, I feel like purple are on the lower light houseplants and red's on the brighter light houseplants. So maybe I'm misjudging, but anyway, I feel like whenever I walk into a houseplant store, the most common color I'm going to see is purple, followed by red. So I really do appreciate the ones that have some really vibrant red tones. And I feel like this begonia is probably not the most exciting begonia out there. I believe I got this one from the Potted Elephant, I believe. And I'm realizing there's like flour from when I baked cookies recently. This one used to be in my kitchen. So anyway, I should have cleaned it off, it doesn't matter. This has been a really reliable begonia. If you saw my Potted Elephant unboxing video where I got this from like a year and a half ago, maybe at this point, maybe 2 years. Honestly, I have no idea how long I've had this houseplant. It was so small, I didn't even know what it was. And now it's just grown so much. It's creeping all over the place. It's really just formed so much character. And this is definitely one of those begonias that is responsible for me falling more for begonias, which I never thought I would be a begonia person, but I'm getting there. Like I said in my recent videos, not trying to add too many new ones to my collection because sometimes they're a little overwhelming and they're a little bit more difficult to upkeep. I mean, you can see this creeping stem at one point. If I was caring for this plant in the most delicate of manners, probably still would hold on to many more of its leaves, but I'm still learning, okay? But honestly, I think this is a pretty showy houseplant, and the fact that it has so much character. Did I like it a little bit more when it was just a full pot in the center here? Yeah, I guess I would admit that. But now that it's creeping all over the place, I think it's really gaining a lot of character, and I'm kind of interested to see how this houseplant's going to grow in the future, and if these stems thingies, stalks, I don't know the word, if they grow too long, I'm sure I can just propagate them. I should do my research on that. I'm still learning with begonias, may I remind you. But I've really been enjoying this one, and not to mention Begonia erythrophylla is probably like one of the most inexpensive begonias out there. I don't think this thing would cost you any more than like $15 for a nice starter pot. So I could be wrong. I hope I'm not. But anyway, Begonia erythrophylla, really, really cool. There are so many more begonias out there too. I don't really want to go off about begonias right now because I'm like ruining my credibility second by second with them, but they're fantastic. And maybe a year from now, I'll be a begonia expert. So let's talk about this one next. I feel like this is a really unknown houseplant to the point that I didn't even know what it was when I found it. I bought it and I had to turn to you guys to find out what it is. So thank you guys so much. So this is a Hemigraphis. I'm like already blanking on the species name. I'll put it on screen. But this is very closely related to the waffle plant, or the purple waffle plant, I believe it is. That's the more common version of this houseplant, is often going to be in terrarium plant selections at your local houseplant stores. Very, very inexpensive. I think I purchased this one right here in the terrarium selection for like $2. But it was just so cool with these silver leaves on top, which on the back side is this really, really vibrant purple. And so I was saying that like I find that the purple is usually on the lower light houseplants, and then adding on with this being a more gray leaf, I've been growing this in a lower light scenario, which From the feeling of these leaves, it feels like an herb, like, or something that should be like grown in full sun, but I was using the context clues and I think I'm doing an okay job. I know nothing about this houseplant. Give me tips if you have them. But I kind of just bought this on a whim because it looked very, you know, my vibe, woodlandy, a little bit more gothic too. Not that I'm a goth or anything clearly, but like, it definitely has a little bit more of a gothic witchy vibe, which I think is also pretty cool and something that you're not going to see pretty often with houseplants. But I don't have much to say about this houseplant other than the fact that it's just really cool. It's really out there. I just love that the leaves are like leaf shaped. Like it's just like the standard leaves that you would draw as a child, but they're freaking grayish silver with that purple on the backside. And it's starting to put off a lot of growth. I have like 4 stems and it looks like there's a couple more coming up right here. So I don't know. I bought this thing for $2 and something tells me if I remember to water this thing because it wilts like the dickens, that it might be a really beautiful full houseplant one day. Just a beautiful bush. I feel like it's gonna just give a bush vibe. Maybe I have to train it a little bit. I don't know. But I'm also noticing the way it grows, like this stem right here. I feel like if I had this in a little bit of a larger pot, it has all these little root nublets along the nodes here. So I feel like if these were sitting in soil, if these stems weren't so thick that it would snap if I tried to turn it inside the soil here, that it would root right down into the soil and become an even fuller plant that way. So I guess I could propagate it. Anyway, I feel like I'm going off about this houseplant that I feel like literally none of you care about, but it's cool. It was $2. It's amazing. If you are avid on aroids, I think you're really gonna enjoy this last houseplant. So this is my Philodendron atabapoense. I did talk about this in a recent video, my top 5 philodendron videos, so I do apologize, but how could I not talk about this one again when it sports such a lovely shade of purple on the back sides of the leaves? Like, and in cases, the whole backside, it's not just splotchy like some of the other ones, it's the whole thing. It's pretty incredible, not to mention that it really goes well with the like bluish grayish color that sports on the adaxial surface of the leaves. However, someone did comment on my recent video, my top 5 philodendrons, saying that as these mature, apparently they no longer get the purple on the backside of the leaves, which checks out, I guess. I didn't fact check it, but that checks out. So regardless, I would love this plant either way. It is definitely a much more slow growing houseplant compared to many of my other philodendrons. Like this is a cutting I took off one of my other ones, but I still think I've had this one growing for about 1.5 years at this point. And it's this big, or some of my other philodendrons in 1.5 years grew up to like my ceiling. So you can do the math, but I think this will take a long time before it starts not producing those purple colors, if I'm not mistaken. And hopefully this is one that in a short amount of time, I will be adhering it to my trellis, and then maybe it will get going. You know the adage, the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, the third year they leap. I think we're creeping right now. Maybe we'll get leaping soon. In due time. This has been gaining a lot of popularity, I feel like, in the last year, in like a way that makes me nervous. Like, I don't like it when plants like skyrocket in popularity and their price just like goes crazy, because what did we learn from the Pilea peperomioides? Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. But regardless, if you do get your hands on this houseplant, it is very, very easy to grow. Like I said, I have 2 of these and they are both fantastic philodendrons to have in your possession. And they are really, really easy to propagate, just like many other philodendrons, but you can see these nodes and how much they just want to root. Like it's a very fertile myrtle over here. So yeah, I really love it. Like I said, don't love the way that the houseplant market works sometimes, particularly with aroids, but in due time, I think this one will follow the trend of all of the other ones. Still a very reliable houseplant. It's not like spending $600 on a variegated plant that could turn brown on you in a day's time. So yeah, just keeping it in perspective, I guess. But anyway, I think that's gonna do it for today's video. Houseplants that have different colors on the undersides of their leaves. I tried to think of a more concise title for this video, but I could not. But I think it tells you everything you need to know. So yeah, I'm just gonna recap them real quick because why not? So I talked about Stromanthe, sanguinea, Triostar. We'll hold it up for you real quick. The probably most prevalent one of all. I talked about Aglaonema chocolate, one of my favorite Chinese evergreens on the market as of late. It's really beautiful, looks a lot like Calathea ornata, so if you've been struggling with that, maybe give the Aglaonema a try. Syngonium, erythrophyllum, Llano Carti Rd, which as I mentioned is available on stevesleaves.com, and you can use code NICK15. So sorry, just use my code. And so, Peperomia pereskiifolia in the penis pot by Group Partner. We have our Cissus adenopoda right here. Really, really one of my favorite houseplants in existence. It's just completely my vibe. We talked about Begonia, erythrophyllum, I forget. This Hemigraphis, alternata? Hemigraphis, am I making that up? You'll see on screen. And Philodendron and atabapoense, how could you forget? Because I just talked about it. So thank you guys so much again for joining me today. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at phillyfoliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.